You are listening to ESL Talk, a podcast made for English teachers by English teachers. Here are your hosts, Daniel and Golnaz.
Hello, welcome to episode 13 of ESL Talk.
Today, we're going to be talking about the transition of moving our schools and classes from the physical classroom to the online sphere. As we know, this COVID-19 pandemic is raging on, and there's still many variables that teachers need to consider and new approaches to think about when shifting to the online classroom.
And in our interview today, we will be talking to Ben, an English teacher who has rebuilt his language school of more than 150 students from the physical to the online classroom.
Yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting discussion. So Golnaz, tell me first of all, what has your experience been so far from moving classes from physical classroom to the online space?
Well, for me, the major change and the major shift was that I actually gave a break to teaching and I moved and transitioned to studying online for the master's degree. And but in between, before I officially started studying at the university, I had to work online for like half of the year after the pandemic. So that was a big challenge. That was a big transition with all of its, advantages and disadvantages. But overall, it was a great experience because I learned a lot. I had to adapt to the new style of teaching and the new style of learning. And so far we are here. We are doing it. We are doing everything online. So I could say it has been quite of a journey. And what about you, Daniel? What has the last year or so been like for you teaching online?
Honestly, it's been very busy. I guess this is probably similar across a lot of professions, but teaching online, I think you find that you spend more time in front of your computer, you're doing more things, you're more busy, you have more work, more tasks, and something that initially seems like it should be a little bit less time-consuming ends up becoming more time-consuming. I don't know exactly why that is. I don't know the exact reasons for it, but I know a lot of us are experiencing this kind of issue. And I would say it's been nice in some ways, obviously the comfort and being able to work from home and, you can connect with students from all over the world very easily, most of the time. But I think as well, some students prefer being in the classroom and that's what they're used to. But I think for me and my style and my approach, I think it's pretty well suited to teaching online. And I was also very lucky that in the past I was able to teach online before the pandemic started. So that meant I had a chance to, build experience and get familiar and get comfortable with the technology. So it was a little bit more of a comfortable transition for me as opposed to others who have had to kind of just suddenly deal with it, out of nowhere.
Interesting. And what about some challenges you faced in making the transition?
Well, I'm sure you've experienced it too. A lot of these, technology issues around software, around things not working properly, or microphones or cameras not working properly. I mean, we find that when we're recording the podcast quite regularly. Another challenge as well is some students don't feel comfortable being online. They don't feel comfortable at home. They don't feel they can focus as much. Maybe they get distracted easily. Well, they should be listening, but they're actually on their phone or they're talking to others or they're doing laundry or they're drinking a beer. All of these things have happened during my online classes. So I get it. It is different, but I think the key here is for a teacher to be engaging, to keep students on their toes, keep them focused and keep them motivated because it's very easy to just kind of sit and talk for an hour or 2 hours straight and not involve students. And when you don't involve students, that means they're going to switch off and start to drift. And it makes sense. These are some things that we have to think about. So I think the biggest challenge is just making sure the technology works and making sure students get the most out of the classes and the most out of the, the lectures or whatever it is that you're delivering to them.
Great. And if you want to list out some advantages and disadvantages of teaching online, what would you say?
Yeah, I've kind of covered a few, but let me just recap because I think there's quite a lot of value in discussing this. In terms of the advantages, I would definitely say obviously the comfort. You can teach from home. If you're in a different place, if you're not in the same place as your students, then obviously, they can listen and they can still attend the lessons. If you have different time zones, which I think is wonderful. Online teaching goes across borders, time zones, nationalities, whatever it is, which I think is great. Another advantage I didn't know, a lot of software has tools to help students, so you can record lessons easily. You can even have them transcribed. So I think one tool that I use, Microsoft Teams, some students turn on annotations. So luckily, because I have a good teaching voice, it's able to be translated quite easily. So that helps students as well. And then again, as long as you have a computer or a laptop, or a phone in a lot of cases, then you can learn, you can do things that you wouldn't be able to do. And it saves a lot of time. I mean, my commute before, when I was, working in my university job, was an hour each way. So it's 2 hours a day that I have to take out of my day for commuting. Whereas now I can kind of take my time, have breakfast, do a few chores, prepare myself, get my lessons, more, more engaging, or add more content to them so that they're more relevant. And they're better for my learners, so hopefully they benefit from that. So there's a lot of advantages there to cover. But disadvantages of teaching online, technology is an advantage and also a disadvantage, because there's a lot of times when technology doesn't work, or it works for me but it doesn't work for the student, or it works for the student and it doesn't work for me. So that's one real headache that I think is always going to exist, and hopefully as time goes by it'll get better. Other disadvantages are that, again, students might not always understand things as well. They might not see things as clearly. They might not, fully follow the content of the material. And they might not have the opportunities that they'd have in the classroom, meaning they can't be close to the teacher. They can't ask questions. They can't build that rapport. And I think for students in a classroom environment, you can't really get to know each other as students, and you can't really get to know your teacher that well. So there are some disadvantages, but I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages for the most part.
Yep, I agree with you. And I think that something that I experienced myself is that in order to do team projects or group projects, especially some projects that need a lot of planning ahead, a lot of, coordination and collaboration, for these kinds of projects and for these kinds of tasks, we as teachers and as students, we will be able to perform better. I personally think so. We will be able to perform better if we have the face-to-face experience. That's what I think, but I also agree with you. There are a lot of advantages to this whole online approach, and I think it's here to stay with us.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the blended model might work best for a lot of people. But again, only time's going to tell if that's going to be viable or not. So with that being said, what do you think the future of language teaching will look like? Do you think it's going to be all online or mostly online? Do you think this market's going to keep growing? What are your thoughts on this?
I think if we reach that safe point that we can get back to the normal life with, feeling sure and feeling safe, I think at that point the whole online learning and online teaching will stay and will remain with us, and we will be using it to, have the blended approach to learning and teaching. And I think not only because of because right now we have to do it and we do not have any other choice, but because of all the advantages that it brings, it is a wise choice that many people are going to make in the future. But also because we have missed being and having that face-to-face experience, I think many people are going to rely a little bit on face-to-face experience as well. But I think at some point it just becomes a matter of choice, and depending on the situation, depending on the lesson, the university, school, and everything that surrounds the whole topic, people are going to make different choices. What are your predictions, Daniel?
Yeah, I think there'll be more people teaching online, definitely. Now, I think the trick is to the key is to try to differentiate yourself, provide something different, provide something unique, and give value to your learners. So I think there will be a growing market online, especially for English teaching, because, again, the market for that is massive. So I would say that a blended approach would be ideal, but I think a good teacher or a good course or a good method of teaching would be to have some online and some face-to-face. Now, if that's not possible, then it has to be all online. But I don't think we should ever underestimate the value of good face-to-face listening, speaking, and interaction, because those really help learners much more than just an online capacity. And I think the more options you have for students, the better it's going to be for them, and the more they'll get out of the experience.
Definitely. And I think future research will also help us know more about this whole what is best to do.
Yeah, because no one really knows right now, which is, it is what it is. And hopefully in time, things will be more clear, and we'll see where things lie in a year or two. But, I think there's a lot of potential and still very exciting for English teachers. And there's still a lot of potential there going forward as well.
Definitely. So now we are going to get ready for the next portion of our today's podcast, the interview. Today we have Ben with us. Please stay tuned. Can we begin by learning a little about your English teaching journey so far?
Yeah. So for those who are probably, if this is a podcast, they probably won't be able to see it, but I'll give you a quick look. And I'm basically now in the mountains, in the high mountains of Peru, at around about 3,400 meters above sea level. And I teach English online, and I'm generating my income through online teaching. I was an ESL entrepreneur, and I had my own English school, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later, but that's also kind of been stopped by the pandemic. And so ultimately, my journey began like I finished university and I love to travel. And I went to Southeast Asia, and you could see that a lot of people were getting by, expats were living abroad and having a pretty interesting life by teaching English. So that's how I first got introduced to it, through travel. I did a solo travel to Southeast Asia. And when I came back from that travel, I wanted to continue to travel. But a friend of mine said, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you get the CELTA and teach English so that you can make an income whilst you travel? So you're hitting two birds with one stone. So yeah, the second time that I left for my solo travels, I was had a little bit less cash. So what I had left, I invested into this course, and I just kind of pointed at the map, because my mum was an air hostess for British Airways, so I had a free ticket pretty much anywhere in the world till I was 24. So I said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo sort of thing, catch a tiger by its toe, landed on Buenos Aires, and I was like, go, and that was it. I just flew out there, and within a week I had a job. I had an apartment. Even though I didn't speak the language, just the power of stepping into an office or coming to a city, even if you're unprepared, you're there. You're there on the door saying, hey, I want to work for you, or I want to live here. And so, that's how it got started, basically. It was kind of a way to make money and to travel at the same time. And that was nearly 10 years ago now. And I'm still in Peru. I got
what
the
a
travel
journey.
bug.
Yeah. So what should our listeners know specifically about the ESL market in Peru? Because it's probably not something that many of us know about. So what can you tell us about that, Ben?
Yeah, it's a little bit exotic. Not many people from the UK know much about Peru, apart from Paddington, Paddington Bear. But there is more to it. You've got the coast, you've got the mountains, you've got the jungle. So geographically, it's very varied. It's about 3 times the size of France. So it's a pretty big country. It's not a massive population of 30 million. So you feel like there's a lot of space, I guess. Amazing food. And there's a big opportunities for ESL English teachers. So the reason why, I came to Cusco originally, Cusco, Peru, the Sacred Valley here, because of Machu Picchu. So you probably heard of Machu Picchu. It's more famous than Cusco because it's the UNESCO World Wonder, one of. And so, you relate anything that's tourism, excuse the dogs, anything that's tourism related is this is Peru, by the way, dogs in Peru, synonymous. So you'd have to definitely like dogs. If you like dogs, then you'd love Peru. But apart from that, it's just that there was a big demand for tourism, obviously pre-COVID, and therefore there's an obvious link towards tourism. So a big, if you're looking for easy money, you think, where are the tourists going? Because they're going to need English, as it's an international language. Better English that a person has here gives them a better ability. If they can communicate their ideas and the value of their offer better, then ultimately they make more money. So everyone wants to learn English. Everyone wants to learn English. You could just be sitting outside. You say, oh, I'm an English teacher. Oh, my kids want to learn English. They'll give you their number, you know. And I love that because it also gives you favors. When you're a traveler, for example, you can exchange this skill or this offer in many ways. I've used it so many times to barter instead of using cash. For example, when I set up my business in Peru, these Peruvian lawyers were marketing themselves as bilingual lawyers. But I came in there and was like, look, your English isn't very good. So how about we make a deal here? I give you English classes and you set up the business for me. And they're like, all right, that sounds good. You know, so there you can barter with it too, and you could barter a meal for it. You could barter free lodging for it. You can really use it because it is in demand. People see English as opportunity, and they're willing to pay for it. They will invest in it. So yeah, big market. The other thing to mention is a little bit informal. It's a little bit, you know, it's not. Do you need a degree, for example? No. Do you need a TEFL? Ideally, if you want to be a professional, you want to take this seriously, you should be investing in your career and your professional development as much as possible. But that being said, paperwork is very loose and very cash in hand kind of economy, so you don't necessarily need that. And that's obviously going to give you an advantage. In my case, that's how I'm able to charge more, because I'm a professional. But people can, 20 years ago, probably there were less travelers, so you just needed to speak English. I would say to set yourself apart now from being an amateur, which is basically someone who's not really, it's just a kind of a part-time thing. It's a hobby almost, to a professional, which is well trained in what you do. You've got to invest in your education, but you don't necessarily need a degree. You just need a great attitude. You need to be here. If you speak Spanish, that's going to help you a lot too, because it's a monocultural, it's a monolingual classroom. Everyone speaks Spanish, so you can use that as a kind of a cheat to gain,
nice.
Awareness. So yeah, there's that. So if obviously, I'm here to help. There's not many teachers out here, but if you want to get in contact with me and you've got more questions about that, anything that comes up, I'm your man, because this is my little niche out here in darkest Peru.
Wonderful. Great overview of everything there. And it sounds like there's a lot of things to consider, and it just shows the power of English. So transitioning then, going from, traveling, teaching, and moving into that kind of starting up your own business and starting your own English school, what was the process behind that? And what was the motivation for wanting to do that, Ben?
Yeah, I think it's personal and it's professional. Like, are you prepared to take the leap? Do you have the skills that you need? I did. I had a business degree, and then I saw a gap in the market, basically. So I saw an opportunity. I saw a growing demand. I saw a great process through the competition, and I also saw a kind of a way to innovate or be different, to be unique. And that was like coming from a British English kind of background. There was no British English school. So I obviously had that natural advantage of being British in Peru. I've taken the sacrifice to be 10,000 kilometers away from home, and I'm now bringing my knowledge to this community. And I'm also able through that to actually see that gap by traveling. I mean, if you're always looking inwards, you're not going to be able to see the opportunity. So by traveling, you see that gap in the market, because you're like, oh, how come they're not doing that? So that's your opportunity. And I just had a good enough command of the language by that point. That was really important, I think. So communication skills was really important. Bit of creativity, obviously. You need to build website. I built a website. I built a brand. I built a logo. Did all that kind of stuff. A name for the company. Planning and prep. Strategies. Doing your SWOT analysis. Kind of business stuff. Doing your research. Your marketing before and a little bit of capital as well. You have to invest in it. This is a business to invest in it. So you're going to have to invest. Well, I had to invest into it in a printer, in textbooks, in whiteboards, into flyers, business cards, and time. Obviously, I invested a lot of time. I was literally out there on the main road with my suit on. These people thought I was Mormons because I was so well dressed, handing out these flyers. I was there. I was pushing myself. I was taking action. And, that was it. When the students signed up, they liked what I was delivering. So they stayed. And then I kept marketing. So I kept getting new students. And just like the turnover was quite low, it was like people felt that they were getting value for money. And so they stayed. And then what do? You say, hey, bring your friend along. And so it just grew. It just grew from like one student in the first month, then 3 students in the second month, then 5, then 7. And I took that. At that point, I was just teaching in my house, like kind of doing what I'm doing right here. I'm working with you guys from my house, which I love. But I decided to take the brick and mortar route, even though at that time I actually started a YouTube channel and probably could have, should have, would have done more online stuff, knowing what I, didn't, because of what's happened in recent events. But in any case, it jumped. I moved to an office with a mezzanine. It was the classroom on top, the office below. And I was kind of running between both, giving information and teaching the class. And then then I hired a teacher because I had I was going horizontal. So just getting more and more students. And stuff, I'd been working really hard because January and February here, especially in Peru, is the summer holidays. So I've been working really hard for January, February, selling loads of courses, doing really, really well, hitting some amazing targets for the first quarter. And so I decided to take one of my friends was like, hey, Ben, they've got cheap flights to Lima. So I was like, oh, great, a cheap flights to the beach. That would be wonderful. Obviously, in hindsight, they were obviously offering cheap flights because they probably knew better than I did, because this was mid-March. So I flew off to Lima, which is about 500 kilometers away. And I went to the beach and was happily at the beach when Peru went under full quarantine, a very strict military quarantine for at the beginning, it was two weeks, and it went on for 6 months. I think it was 6 months in total. So I was like, 2 weeks is fine at the beach. I'm loving this, no problem. But then those 2 weeks turned into another 2 weeks, and basically it was just like, oh no, like my school's been now closed. I had to make decisions like, okay, suspend everything. Nobody knew what was going on, right? And I was away from my school, the teachers, the students, everything. Nobody knew what was going on, and I was 500 kilometers away from everything, stuck on my own in a hotel, and I stayed that way for 2 months. Until I eventually got out of the hotel and I hitchhiked 500 kilometers. And you can see that story on Lad Bible because I ended up selling it. It's a story in itself of my adventure to get back to Cusco in the Andes during the pandemic. So when I did finally get back, I was like, I had to make a decision, right? What was I going to do? And I tried to I moved into the school because I lived in a kind of a house. I'd kind of converted a house into a school. So I said, okay, I'm not going to pay my other rent and then this rent. I'll just move in. He gave me a discount. And we kind of just settled in and we started just doing, I was already thinking about doing online classes anyway. I'd kind of already transitioned to LMS programs back in 2019. And I was currently doing a deal, a B2B, business to business. I was doing one of the train companies here. I was offering them services and I'd offered them. Basically, I was like blended learning. I was like, hey, this is the new thing. It's like online education. Instead of me coming in and repeating all the information 100 times, losing your employees' time, they can just go on, log in the evening and do 10 minutes every day of English study. So they like that. So they bought into that. And then this whole pandemic was like, oh, well, I should have been doing this 5 years ago rather than, because ultimately my school, I had to end up liquidating. I sold everything up and I've now moved to the country because I'm 100% digital. I'm back to where I was a little bit. It's like I'm back to those 10 or 15 students that I had 5 years ago. It's a little bit sad. It's a little bit, but everything has stayed in here, everything I learned over that experience is still here, and I could do it again tomorrow if you're allowed to. You're not even allowed to. So I'm just doing the same thing, and I just believe that anyway, that was like a stepping stone, because the internet's far bigger outreach. Everyone's now had a crash course in how to use Zoom for online classes. So it's the future, and so I'm always thinking 3 to 5 years ahead of myself, and I'm continually building my courses online and giving my offers out, not just to English students, but now to teachers who want to get their own students and live like this out in the Andes. Can't go wrong with that view. That's real.
Beautiful. So looking at this whole shift and, the whole challenges that it brought with itself, from the students' perspective, was there anything that stopped some of the students from making this shift to the online classes with you?
Naturally, yeah, you have economic barriers to entry. And so that basically people just don't have a computer, or they might have a smartphone, but not necessarily a laptop. So it's not really ideal to be studying with a smartphone, is it? Connectivity is an issue in some places. Here it's great. I'm really fortunate for that. But you can see how the kids up in the community at the top of that mountain up there are not going to have any access to it. However, in my case, I work generally with adults and professionals. I have a kind of a focus more on business or professionals, or that's kind of my target I prefer to work with anyway. But I can see how the state would have a big problem with that. So in effect, my clientele weren't really necessarily affected by it, but other markets I think so. It's a transition that we've all had to make. Some people have resisted it, other people have embraced it. I've seen it as an opportunity, and it works well. Like, some people simply don't want to do it. Like, one person had paid me for a whole year of English courses, and they just said, no, Ben, we don't want to do online. We're going to wait until this is over to do the normal classes. So in the end, I've not really been able to refund that money, because I said, look, there was no option. The only option was now online, and you have to adapt. If you're not willing to adapt, then you lose out. And that's simply it. I offered the service, but online.
Yeah. It's kind of the standard now, isn't it? So it's, we've got to adapt, and we've got to adjust to the surroundings and the environment. So next question, Ben, what aspects of English teaching did you need to adapt to suit your learners in the online classroom? Because I'll imagine some of your students had never really had online classes before. So how did you kind of cater to those students and make that leap?
Yeah, I think it was, I like technology anyway, so I'm pretty fast, and I think I can see how other teachers and students must get frustrated with the slowness of technology, or even with the technical difficulties that we encounter doing these kind of podcasts. It can be very frustrating, but also the plus side is that we can have this conversation. My student no longer needs to be here with me, or no longer needs to consume petrol or other costs and whatever other lost time by not having to travel. I always thought that was a lot of additional money that my students had to make to actually come to classes every day and take a bus and back. So yeah, how do you cater to it? Well, I do believe that I think the important thing is having like an LMS program. So if you're not familiar with that term, it's a learning management system. So it's basically, I keep a lot of the problems that I find or I encounter in my niche, which is South American speakers in Peru specifically. They have a tendency to have the same problems. So if I can just store whatever I create into one place, I can reuse that material, and I'm free to reuse that however I want, without any worries about infringement or any sort of problems there. So I just try to cater to the 4 skills as much as possible within my classes, which are basically communication, collaboration, critical thinking. No, those are the 4 C's. Sorry.
We've got so many acronyms as teachers. Don't worry. I know.
Yeah,
it's confusing.
The 4 skills were reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So I'm just trying to meet those in every class. Maybe we'll do a bit of a reading, and then we'll just do a speaking. And I'm always with I have a coaching approach to teaching. So I'm not a lecturer, so to speak. Sometimes I'm a lecturer, but other times I'm also a coach. Sometimes I'm not teaching, but I'm just delivering challenges to my students. I'm getting them to take action. And I'm also working a lot on mindset as well, and about why are they doing this, and building their motivation to learn, so that they do progress and continue, because it's a process learning a language. So 10 minutes per day, that's gonna
Beautiful.
solve your English problems.
So looking ahead, do you think the blended approach to learning will be more preferred going forward?
Yeah, I think that it was maybe, I mean, I already liked it anyway. I like the idea of saving time. I like the idea of blended learning. I was always a fan. At the moment, it's just not possible, because it's ultimately, you can't, not at least in Peru, you can't have classes. But yeah, in the future, again, it's a matter of training and awareness of this kind of technology. So I think a lot more teachers are probably more empowered to use technology, use it as that database. And I mean, you're going to want to. I mean, the best teachers are going to want to adapt and survive. I mean, the best teachers don't even need schools anymore. I think they would just work on their own methodology. And yeah, I do use blended. Like if I have a student who comes to me here, and I'm literally face to face with them, I can go ahead and then sell my digital product as well, which is the online course. And I say, well, you should take my online course, because that would be really great if you do that for 10 minutes every day. There's a program for you to take every day, which you can trust. You know, the information's good. You're not searching for it on the internet. You don't know, YouTube, is it good or is it not? And you're going to have access to me. So if you have any questions. So yeah, I'm always using, I mean, who isn't? I mean, if I can offer that as an extra added value, then I can charge that high price. I can be like, well, you get a private class and you get also my 30 videos on English grammar that you can complete in your own time when you want, 24/7 for the rest of your life. So I'm there to help provide them that result. So I'm giving more.
Sign me up.
Yes, man.
Yeah, we cannot deny the advantages for both sides, actually, of the whole, digitalized world.
I think it's more events. They have more events going on, like 3-day boot camps, events. That, or personally, in my opinion, I'm not going to do B2C so much. I mean, I'm going to do just B2B. I mean, if you don't need to have an office or a school, you can just walk into an HR department and be like, hey, I'm an English teacher and I want to help you guys. And exactly. That's enough to get you a contract, and you're in their office teaching them. So you don't even need an office.
Yep.
Definitely. Yep. So now I want to ask you, is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew at the start of the shift to 100% online school?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this one, and I mean, I was thinking about saying the pandemic, right? And Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, because I'd be rich, and and whatnot. I would have done this transition earlier, probably 5 years ago. But I would say one of the biggest things I like is a website called appsumo.com. So if you are interested in building this stuff and you're starting out and you're a bit of a frugal kind of guy like me, I don't like to spend. There's a lot of software out there which is really expensive. It's kind of based towards. I mean, if I was in the UK working, it probably wouldn't sound like a lot, but because I'm in Peru, it seems like a lot. So I'm always really keen to find software which does what you need it to do and doesn't break your bank. So AppSumo offers you lifetime software. You buy the software outright. You never have to worry about it. I use SendFox for the emails instead of paying MailChimp. MailChimp is so much. It's like $30 a month for 1,000, 2,000, I don't know. Or it's like pay $50 for SendFox and for life. And so it's a no-brainer, right? It's an absolute no-brainer if you've got a long-term vision. You don't want to be putting, I mean, basically, if you keep your costs down, you don't really have to make that much money to, revenue is vanity. It's like, what's your profit at the end of the day? How much are you keeping? So if you're using something like Kajabi, you're talking about $150 per month. That's a hell of a lot of money. I was like, you're going to get, I mean, I'm not going to break even. Especially when you're starting out, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to lose your money. So I wish I'd known about AppSumo, because it probably, I mean, I've spent $500, $600, $700 on software or more, because it just helps to run the business a little bit better. And but I'm also a bit of a tech kind of guy, and you do need to know about this stuff if you want to go online, or find somebody who knows this stuff. But yeah, this software is the cheapest kind of that you can get. So
So, Ben, what advice and tips would you have for teachers now who are wanting to start teaching English online, because people are slowly making that shift now? So what advice and tips would you have for them getting started?
Yeah, I mean, don't go slowly, take a lot of action, learn, invest. If you don't know anything, then invest in your education. You maybe this is a gap in the market, isn't it? There's not that much on. I mean, at least when I was starting my English school, I was scouring the internet for information. Like, no, I couldn't find it. A lot of information on becoming an entrepreneur and kind of a teacher entrepreneur. So these days there are a bunch of groups, but I would just get in contact with people as well. Like, ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. So ask. That's a really big piece of advice, I would say. Ask and you will receive. So, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You're going to need it. If you don't like it, you delegate it, but you have to know a little bit about it so you don't get mugged off. Okay, so that's important. So do a little bit yourself. Don't, there's so much to learn. So it's a process of failure. Failure is a great thing. Failure means you tried, you swung, you tried to hit the bat. Even if you didn't hit it, the ball, you still tried and you still learn. So it's the mindset. I would definitely think first off, mindset, really important. Then the skills, what do you need? Marketing, sales skills, any sort of mentorship, books or people, coaches, really, really important. And just don't give up, just keep going. There's going to be so many obstacles, but they say, the challenge, more challenging the path, then the more beautiful the view when you get to the end.
And you're living proof of that, aren't you, Ben? Because I know you guys can't see, but this view is absolutely incredible. So yeah, there we go.
It's not easy to climb the mountain, but I tell you, that view is one hell of a view when you get up there.
I'll bet it is. Yeah, thanks, Ben. So just finally, how can our listeners get in touch with you, and how can we connect with you if you want to find out more?
I really love to help teachers who are struggling a little bit, maybe who are have just recently kind of taken their CELTA or TEFL and are looking for a little bit of professional help, a little bit of coaching, still don't understand what a CCQ is or an ICQ or STT, or maybe they took the CELTA 5-10 years ago and you need a little refresher. If you want to invest and become a professional, which will help you to stand out in your market, then I would recommend getting in touch with me, just to go maybe do a consultation, get some ideas. I come from a place of servitude, so I'm not out to sell, but I do need to make money to survive. And so, yeah, maybe I'm going to ask you for some money, but usually that's just the way that's how we get into business with one another. We exchange money. Now, the other one is that the other thing is, they say your ideal client is someone who's just like you. So if there's anyone else who's thinking about it or wants to start an ESL company or online, it wants to go solo and doesn't have the strategy, doesn't have the marketing skills, maybe comes from a more linguistic background, understands the language and all that, and it's got good methods, but doesn't understand they don't understand their own self-worth, don't know what their niche is, they don't know what their offers are, they don't know where to promote it. Then that's another thing that I basically have done for the past, with my business, it was about 7 years, and I'm continuing to do so online. That's another person I love to work with. So if you're either one of those kind of people, go ahead, get in contact. It's so much better to speak to somebody than just to read blogs, because you just get your answers when you want them, as you ask for them. So it's so much better to have that kind of contact. And that is where my website for that is https // I'm like typing it out in my head. BenEnglish.online. BenEnglish.online. I've always got a few free lead magnets on there. I've got a TEFL book right now. It's an ebook which describes kind of my story and my kind of resume of English teaching. Right now it's free. It might not be free forever, but if you want to put your email in on the website, you can get that. There's also another one with conversation worksheets which I've developed, which is the same, BenEnglish.online / I think it's conversation. And those are some free conversation worksheets that you can use with your students. On the other hand, I offer for my Spanish, if anyone wants to actually take English classes with me, then my other website is inglesuperior.com. That's for basically anyone who might want to actually study English, maybe pass the TOEFL, emigrate to the US, work on their business, English skills. that's that side of that's my other offer for students, inglesuperior.com.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks for your time. It was really interesting to learn about you and your story. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again in the future. And I'm sure our listeners will be reaching out to you as well. Thanks so much, Ben.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much from Peru.
All right. Thanks, Ben, for your insights and your story, which was fascinating. And as I said, it doesn't quite do it justice just listening to his story. So do try to get in touch with Ben because he has a lot to offer. He's very experienced, and hopefully he can, help out fellow English teachers and those who are interested in teaching as well. As always, guys, don't forget to reach out to us via email, esltalkpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can keep following us on Instagram and Facebook. We're continuing to grow. So thank you so much for your support, and we hope to see you again soon.
See you next week, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for even more ESL teaching content.